Hello everyone and welcome to the lecture on AWS App Runner. So this lecture will contain all those topics. What is AWS App Runner? App Runner architecture, App Runner service, source type, repository provider, App Runner connection, runtime, deployment, custom domain, maintenance, App Runner supported configurations, App Runner resources, App Runner resource quotas. So what is AWS App Runner? AWS App Runner provides a fast, simple, and cost-effective deployment method, which allows users to deploy applications directly from source code or container images to a scalable and secure web application in the AWS cloud. The service eliminates technical prerequisites by removing the need to learn new technologies, make decisions about compute services, or understand AWS resource provisioning and configuration. App Runner features direct integration with both code and image repositories, streamlining the deployment process by connecting directly to your source materials. The service includes comprehensive managed features such as automatic CI/CD pipeline integration, high-performance capabilities, built-in auto-scaling functionality, and robust security measures, all fully managed by AWS. App Runner architecture. AWS App Runner takes your source code or source image from a repository and creates and maintains a running web service for you in the AWS cloud. Typically, you need to call just one App Runner action called as create service to create your service. With the source image repository, you provide a ready-to-use container image that App Runner can deploy to run your web service. With the source code repository, you provide your code and instructions for building and running a web service, and you target a specific runtime environment. App Runner supports several programming platforms, each with one or more managed runtimes for platform major versions. At this time, App Runner can retrieve your source code from either a Bitbucket or GitHub repository, or it can retrieve your source image from Amazon Elastic Container Registry, Amazon ECR, in your AWS account. So I'll just go explain all the major terms and terminology of App Runner. So first is service, which is an AWS resource that App Runner uses to deploy and manage your application based on its source code repository or container image. An App Runner service is a running version of your application. Then source type, which we have seen already. This is the type of source repository that you provide for deploying your App Runner service, and the type can be source code or source image. Then repository provider, the repository service that contains your application source. For example, it can be GitHub, Bitbucket, or Amazon ECR. App Runner connection, which is an AWS resource that lets App Runner creates a repository provider account, for example, a GitHub account or organization account. Runtime, which is a base image for deploying a source code repository. App Runner provides a variety of managed runtimes for different programming platforms and versions. So some of them I have mentioned over here, like Python have different version, Node have different version, and Java have few versions. Then a deployment, which is an action that applies a version of your source repository, can be code or image, to an App Runner service. The first deployment to the service occurs as part of service creation. Later deployments can occur in one of two ways. One of them is automatic deployment, which is a CI/CD capability. You can configure an App Runner service to automatically build, in the case of source code, and deploy each version of your application as it appears in the repository. This can be a new commit in a source code repository or a new image version in a source image repository. And second type is manual deployment, a deployment to your App Runner service that you explicitly start. Custom domain, a domain that you associate with your App Runner service. Users of your web application can use this domain to access your web service instead of the default App Runner subdomain. So either you can have this one, which is given by AWS, or you can also use your custom domain to serve your app runner service. Maintenance. It's an activity that app runner occasionally performs on the infrastructure that runs your app runner service. When maintenance is in progress, service status temporarily changes to operation in progress for a few minutes. So you will see that in console. And actions on your service, for example, deployment, configuration update, pause or resume, or deletion during this time are blocked for this period of time. You can try the action again a few minutes later when the service status returns to running. So basically, they have maintenance activity wherein basically all operations are blocked for a very short duration of time. So these are the supported configurations. So you can have CPU starting from 0.25 virtual CPU with a memory of 0.5 GB all the way up to 4 vCPU and 12 GB. And these are the resources. So this is how it looks like. So I already went over the definition, but this is how it will look like. So in case of a service, it will be having an ARN, which looks something like this. Basically region, account ID, service name, and an optional service ID. And for a connection, this will be the ARN. And this exists as a separate resource for sharing across multiple services. So this provides your app service connection with access to private repositories stored with third-party providers. And auto scaling has something like this. These are the ARN and something like observability configuration. So this I'll just talk about. So this one provides your app runner service with settings that control the automatic scaling of your application. This is observability configuration, and this configures additional application observability features for your app runner services. This also exists as a separate resource for sharing across multiple services. And VPN connector, this configures a VPC settings for your app runner services. And this also exists as a separate resource for sharing across multiple services. So this is how the ARN will looks like. And this case will be observability configuration, auto scaling configuration, service connection. And finally, we have VPC ingress connection. This is an AWS app runner resource used to configure incoming traffic. It establishes a connection between a VPC interface endpoint and the app runner service to make your app runner service accessible from only within an Amazon VPC. And it has again a different object for the Amazon resource name. And we have this observability configuration, and this has slightly different object here. Okay. Moving on. And these are some resource quotas for the app runner. So we have seen all this, and there are some limits, but it can be adjusted by submitting a service request. So you can have 30 services, the maximum number of services that you can create in your account for. Again, it's for every AWS region. So in US East 1, you can have 30 services, but you are in the if you go to US West 2, you can have 30 more. So this is like a very good number, like high number, but it can be adjusted. You can ask for more. Then number of connections, the maximum number of connections that you can create in your account for each AWS region, again 10. And auto scaling configurations, you can have up to 10, and inside that also there is something called names and revisions per name. So you can have 10 names and inside that you can have 5 revisions. So like 5 versions. So 10 into 5, a total of 50 combination. So the maximum number of unique names and the maximum number of auto scaling configuration revisions that you can create in your account for each AWS region for each unique name. Then observability configuration, again 10, and inside that 10 you can have 10 revisions per name. So again 10 into 10, this will be like almost 100 total. So this will have, so you can basically roll back these configurations and these configurations, and then you can have up to 10 VPN connectors in the maximum number of VPC connectors that you can create in your AWS account for every AWS region you can create 10, up to 10. And things which cannot be adjusted was the number of revisions, because this value is already very high. because we are 10 into 5. So this has a hard limit. And VPC ingress correction, the maximum number of VPC ingress corrections that you can create in your AWS account for each AWS region. You can use a single VPC ingress connection to access multiple app runner services. So this has a hard limit of 1 per AWS region. And that's all. Thanks for watching.